South African sides continue to climb the URC table. My name is Mark, let's talk rugby. Another good weekend for the South African sides and not so much for their Welsh counterparts. So in this video, we're going to do kind of the regular thing, lightly touch on each of the games, then have a look at the table. So we're going to start with the Friday night games. First one, Hollywoodbets Sharks 21, Cardiff Rugby 15. So the first half, we basically see Boutelese goes in for the Sharks to open the scoring. 10 minutes later, Mason Grady replies for Cardiff to tie things up. Then Boutelese goes in for his second, and not to be undone, a few minutes later, Mason Grady in for his second for Cardiff. The conversion for his try, though, is missed, so the Sharks, the Sharks missed their conversion as well, so we're tied up again. But before half time, then we have was it Penksy? I can never remember how to pronounce this guy's name, but he's in for a try just before half time, and Henderson adds a conversion. So the Sharks leading, 21-12 at the break, and looking like they're heading towards a bonus point victory with a decent performance from Cardiff. Cardiff still not too far behind, and maybe they could have some kind of comeback in the second half. But second half, we actually have only one score, and it's a penalty from Johan Lloyd with about 7 minutes left on the clock, and that gets Cardiff back within a losing bonus point, back within those 7 points for the losing bonus point. And the Sharks don't add anything to their score and don't get that bonus point win. That could be they're touch and go in terms of if they're actually going to be able to make the playoffs or not. So every point counts at this stage of the season. So that could be a big miss for them, having scored 3 tries in that first half. And also in the first half, Hendrick went to the bin for 10 minutes, and that allowed, it was right after that Grady went in for his second try for Cardiff. But final score, Hollywoodbets Sharks 21, Cardiff 15. So yeah, I think Sharks would be disappointed not to get the bonus point win, whereas Cardiff, I talked about before they went down to South Africa, they had to come away with something, and they've actually come away with a losing bonus point, which again, given that these two teams could be, when we get to round 18, very close to each other on the table, denying Sharks a bonus point and getting a bonus point for themselves. Nice 2-point swing for Cardiff, but obviously Sharks are going to be happy just with the win for now. On to the next game then, and that was Glasgow Warriors 31, Benetton 10. And this one, really took off in the second half. Benetton actually they get out to a lead, have a dogwood going over. Rhino Smith adds a conversion for a 7-point lead for them. Then a dogwood goes to the bin. Glasgow can't actually score anything during that yellow card period, so looking good for Benetton. But then just before the break, Johnny Matthews gets over for a try. Adam Hastings converts it, and minutes to go to the break. It looks like we're going in all square at half time, but Benetton actually get a penalty, and Rhino Smith puts Benetton 10-7 up at the break. But then that's as good as it gets for Benetton. They don't score another point the rest of the game, whereas the Warriors score 4 tries in the second half. 2 minutes into the second half, Watson is in, Hastings converts, and Glasgow now back in the lead of the game. But then, it takes a while for them to really break down that Benetton defence, and it's only the last 20 minutes really that they kind of blow the score out. Max Williamson in with 20 minutes to go. A few minutes later, Stephen in as well. and then who's a Talakai in with about 5 minutes to go for the 5th try. So bonus point win for Glasgow, but it was a tough first half, and we've seen it before from this Glasgow team, the way that they're, when things aren't going against them, that they're able to change things and come back. And it's something that, it's very noticeable, I think, since they've won the URC, that they've more often been able to do that. Whereas other times, similar scenario, go back maybe 3 or 4 seasons, you could have seen maybe Benetton causing an upset here and going on for a win, or just keeping the game tight, and Glasgow maybe, just about scrambling over the line, but no bonus point for them. But that's not how it worked out. Glasgow get all 5 points there and deny Benetton from anything from the game. Glasgow Warriors 31, Benetton 10. Then on to the final game of Friday night, and that is Leinster 36, Scarlets 19. Got a full review of this on the channel if you want to check it out, if you want more details. But let's say straight off the bat, I was impressed with how Scarlets played in this game. They really, put it up to Leinster. They wouldn't lie down. They wouldn't go away. And, I said it in the full review as well. It's the kind of fight that we saw Scarlets demonstrate towards the tail end of the URC 2 seasons ago, which then, kind of led into them being a much harder team to beat last season, and they ended up being 8th in the table. This year, not been a brilliant season for them, but at least they're showing signs that maybe next season is going to be a better one. So we start out with Scarlets open the scoring. Joe Roberts goes in after an extended period in that Leinster 22. Scarlets been piling on the pressure right in those opening 20 minutes, and Leinster not really seeing the ball at all. Joe Hawkins converts it, and Brian Deeney, who took the lifter Scarlets had kicked the penalty at the corner. They went to, took the ball on the line out, but Deeney went early in the line out. Leinster had already been warned about that and been warned about the number of penalties as well. So he goes to the bin. And yes, Scarlets looking good and piling on tons of pressure. Then Joe Roberts goes to the bin for Scarlets. Leinster putting on more pressure. And then Jared Taylor also ending up in the bin for them. So a double yellow card, overlapping yellow card for Scarlets, which is kind of reminiscent to, that's what happened to Leinster against Glasgow and kind of blew the game out. And during that double yellow card period, Leinster managed to go over for a couple of tries. So first, Gary Ringrose in after really nice hands when they moved the ball. And then Joshua Kenny gets in for his first try of the game as well. And Leinster, looking to take control. And really, this was kind of the period for them. It was kind of a 15-minute period. We get those 2 tries in the 10 minutes before half time. And then 5 minutes after the break, then they had another couple of tries. Tommy O'Brien getting over twice. So that's the bonus point for Leinster. But that's really the only period that we saw Leinster really clicking in the game. And, part of that was against 13, and then they had that kind of burst in the second half that we're kind of used to seeing from Leinster. We call it the championship minutes, and it's good from that point of view that they cut that back, but overall performance wasn't great. Then the last kind of 20 minutes or so is kind of more of a balanced affair between the teams. You have Tom Rogers going over for Scarlets, then Max Deegan gets in for Leinster, then Max Douglas in for Scarlets, and then Kenny gets in for his second try of the game with 5 minutes to go. Scarlets then looking to get themselves a bonus point try, but it doesn't come for them. But again, a very decent performance from them. Leinster, as I talked about, in the in the review, like you look at the team sheet and you go down through the players and think, yeah, he had a decent game, he was very good, etc. But then you look at the overall performance and you realize that it really was like, apart from those 15 minutes, a collection of individual performances. It wasn't really a team performance. They weren't, they weren't really, brilliantly set in defence. They weren't really looking after the ball all that great at the breakdown either. And we had the fact as well that Scarlets dominated possession and territory as well. And Leinster, in those opening kind of 20 odd minutes, anytime they got the ball, they were kicking it back to Scarlets. And I've talked about before, I've no issue with teams kicking the ball. And I'm probably one of the defenders of teams kicking the ball because I know what the reasoning behind it is. It's looking for that broken field, that, mismatches, underlying defences, etc. That comes from that kind of thing. But Leinster weren't really doing that. Like, there were times when Gibson Park was basically kicking the ball up in the air and it was almost coming down on top of his own head. It didn't go that far, and Scarlets found it easy to cope with it. And so it seems like, maybe rusty from the fact that a lot of these guys coming back from the Ireland camp into the Leinster system, and maybe that's going to be it, that that they had to have that hit out to maybe perform when they go into Champions Cup. But yeah, I do kind of worry about the fact that we're only 4 games left now in the regular season here. They've got whatever many knockout games that they're going to have in Europe and in the URC. So potentially they've only got, if they get knocked out in Europe, let's say this round are in the quarterfinals, and then it maybe in the quarterfinals of the URC as well. They've maybe got only 7 games left in their season, and for a team to be searching for form at that point really isn't good. Like, when they're the defending champions as well. So, like, I think those Leinster coaches have a lot of work to do to really get them set for the rest of the season. We know the teams can turn it around fairly quickly, but yeah, it's still not kind of set for them. And as I said, Scarlets, was impressed with them overall, but it's one of those things where they've got to be able to do that week in, week out, and that's been their problem this year, is that they haven't. They've produced the odd performance that has kind of stood out in an otherwise kind of poor season for them. But Leinster 36, Scarlets 19, the final score in that one. Now on to the Saturday games. So early game was actually pretty good when I watched this one, but I didn't cover it on the channel because it was just one of those ones where sometimes I love covering the games on the channel, but sometimes you just want to watch a game of rugby and not have to worry about taking notes and stuff like that. So just decided, and maybe have a beer as well, which I did. And sometimes it's just nice to do that. So I said, no, I won't actually cover anything on Saturday. I'll just watch rugby just for the simple pleasure. But so that was nice. But yeah, it was a great game, and it's probably one that I wish I had it covered on the channel, because it really was back and forth, and some really good stuff as well from both teams. So we start off with Munster go in. Sean O'Brien gets in for them and gives them a lead. And we're coming to about maybe like 10 minutes to half time, and it's looking like maybe Munster are going to go in to the break with that lead. But then we have the Bulls striking twice before the break. First of all, Papier goes in. I think he got player of the game. I think he was working. He was so busy at 9, and he's such a threat as well. Sniping and stuff like that. So he goes in to score for the Bulls. Pollard converts that. Then 5 minutes later, Kane Moody, absolutely superb player, gets in as well, and then Pollard converts that one. And now it's got a very different complexion to the game. You've got the Bulls going in at the break leading, but at the same time they've got Norkia in the bin, because he got sent to the bin, I think just before Moody's try. So you think there's maybe a window there for a response from Munster, and we get that at the start of the second half. Tom O'Hearn goes in for a try for them. It's not converted though, so the Bulls still have the lead. And, I think Pollard's accuracy off the tee was a big point of difference, between the teams as well in this one. And then we kind of go back and forth between the teams for a while. Papier gets in for his second for the Bulls. And then shortly after that, Tom O'Hearn gets in for his second to keep Munster in the fight. Then Just gets in for the Bulls, bonus point try. And, it feels like now maybe Bulls are going to start taking control of the game, as Pollard adds a penalty for them as well, and they're kind of stretching away a little bit from Munster. But then Munster hit back, Ben O'Connor in. He gets that's their fourth try, so Munster now they're at least going to take a bonus point out of the game, and maybe they're going to. Looking to push on for potentially a win or a draw in the game as well. But then Pollard lands another penalty, and now the Bulls have just eked outside of that was 7 points. I think they're 8 points ahead at that point. I think it was 34-26 at that point. And now you're thinking, oh well, maybe they've denied Munster the losing bonus point as well. And if Bulls win this, there's a possibility that they could kind of leapfrog Munster in the table as well. But then Munster then Edwin Adogbu, who I thought was superb, real impact from him off the bench, and he just barges away over from close range. 5 minutes to go. Munster back within 3 points. Jack Crowley then hits the post, the outside of the post, with the conversion attempt. If you had got that, Munster potentially, if they won under a penalty, could have, had a shot to win the game. They don't win any more penalties anyway. And then the Bulls get the ball off the field and end the game. But great win for the Bulls, but Munster certainly a big improvement from they got a 45-0 trouncing last weekend, and if it had been kind of a repeat this week, then they might have found themselves really kind of struggling to consolidate that position within the top 8 there. But they come away with 2 bonus points. They're going to be happy with that. But the Bulls, sparked themselves back into life in recent weeks. And they're going to be happy with the bonus point win. Obviously, they would have liked to have denied Munster that second bonus point at the end. It wasn't to be for them. But coming up to the playoffs, what you really want to be doing is winning games. And for now, that's what they're doing. So Bulls 34, Munster 31, the final score. Another epic encounter between these two teams. And it feels like, this is, I think we're kind of in the early stages of what is going to be a massive rivalry between these teams down through the years. When we fast forward a decade, we're going to be looking back at fixtures like this, when these two teams are maybe potentially meeting in semi-finals or finals of whether it's the URC or European competitions or wherever. It just has that feel about it. But Bulls 34, Munster 31, the final score. On to then the second game on Saturday. That was Connacht 21, Ospreys 14. So Connacht off to a decent start. Hurley Langton in within kind of 10 minutes or so of the start to open the scoring for them. And, they're going along fairly well, but then Ospreys cope with a score of their own. Cassende gets in for them. Conversion then from Dan Edwards ties us up. And that's how we go into the break, 7-all. And, at that point, I think rightly Ospreys would be thinking, there's something on here for us. But we've seen kind of a bit more steel from Connacht in recent weeks. They're not as kind of up and down as unpredictable as they've been for so many years. And it feels like, Stuart Lancaster is maybe having a bit of an effect on them in that regard. We're still kind of early days, so we have to see whether they're going to maintain that. But into the second half, Hurley Langton gets for his second try within 5 minutes of the restart. Naughton converts that, so Connacht with a 7-point lead. But then Dara Murray, I hesitate on that because he used to call himself Murray, but I know when he made his Ireland debut, he was announced as Dara Murray, so maybe he's gone back to the normal way we would say that. But he goes to the bin within a couple of minutes of Hurley Langton's second try. And during that period then, Ospreys get in through Luke Morgan. Again, Edwards converts, and now we're all tied up. And, we kind of stay that way coming down the stretch. And, we're into the last 10 minutes. Then Jack Morgan goes to the bin, and Connacht are able to capitalise within a couple of minutes. Matthew Devine gets in, Naughton adds the extras, and that's how we finish. So Connacht get themselves a win. They don't get the bonus point, but I think given how tight it was coming back down those last few minutes, they'll just be happy with the win. And Ospreys get themselves a losing bonus point. Connacht 21, Ospreys 14, the final score. But you feel like for Ospreys, the losing bonus point kind of not really enough given where they are on the table. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. So on to the next games, and it is Fidelity Secure Drive Lions. Like, why did some of the South Africans just end up with the most ridiculous sponsor names? Like, they kind of ruined the name of their team. So I'm just going to say Lions 42, Dragons 26. And we talked about Lions before that. You can basically split their season in half. Doing really well, any games to South Africa. Doing very poorly, any games outside South Africa. Luckily for them, this game was played in South Africa, and they've got a few more as well by the end of the season as well. So, I think we're actually going to see the Lions make the playoffs this year and get into the Champions Cup. So that's going to be brilliant. I'm hoping that they acquit themselves well if that does happen. But yeah. Lions 42, Dragons 26. So Lions with a decent start to the game. It is Mahashe, is it? Gets over within 5 minutes to score for them. Then we have Owen gets in for the Dragons. We have a penalty for Chris Smith. Puts the Lions back in the lead. Then Creel gets in for second try for them. Owen gets in for his second try and Dragon's second try as well before the break. And just before we go in for half-time, Smith adds another penalty as well. So, Lions leading, but Dragons showing that, that they're in the game. And it's good to see Dragons really start performing away from home as well. Into the second half then, and Rear Dyer gets in for a third try for the Dragons. So really starting to put pressure on the Lions, but the Lions, I think, respond really well. Smith goes in for a try. And then we have Nico Stain gets in for their fourth and the bonus point try. Rio Dyer goes to the bin at the same time as well. And during that yellow card period, Stain adds a fifth try in his second as well of the game. And then just after Dyer comes back on the field, Cronje gets a sixth try for the Lions, so they know they've won the game. And then 10 minutes ago, then Rio Dyer in for his second and the Dragons' fourth. So the Dragons, although they don't get a losing bonus point, they do get a try bonus point out of this game. So they'll be fairly happy, going down to South Africa and picking something up on the road. None of the South African teams in South Africa are soft touches. So I think they'll be delighted with the fact that they've come away with a point. There's so many of the European-based teams that go down to South Africa for their two games and come away at absolutely zero out of those. So, Dragons, I think, will be happy with that, happy with the performance, a bit of fight that they showed as well, and the fact that they're able to score 4 tries against a Lions team who are in, pretty decent form. But Lions, another win for them. They climb further up the table. Lions 42, Dragons 26, the final score. On to the next game then, and it is DHL Stormers 33, Edinburgh 14. So Edinburgh's season really kind of ending with a whimper for them. They managed, what was the 7th place last year, qualified for Champions Cup. And we talked about earlier this season, the fact, when we're talking about Champions Cup, the fact that Glasgow and Edinburgh were both in the Champions Cup. We've rarely seen that, both those teams in there in recent years. And, I was saying that what Edinburgh need to do, though, is they need to make sure that it's not just a one-off for them, because you've seen how Glasgow have grown from the fact that they have been competing at the top table in Europe for a number of seasons on the bounce. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like Edinburgh are going to repeat the trick this year. But this game, we start off with Makunu going to the bin on 5 or 6 minutes, I think it was. So Edinburgh playing against 14, but they can't actually get in for a try, and that kind of, probably a warning sign about what was going to happen in terms of the overall game, I think. So Stormers then back to 15, and it's them to open the scoring. Evan Roos gets in, Fernberg and Gamazulu adds the extras. Then, in fairness to Edinburgh, we do see a bit of fight from them before the break. James Lang in for a try. Ross Thompson converts, and we go in 7-all at the break. So not a terrible first half for Edinburgh, but then the second half, a bit more kind of back and forth in the opening 20 minutes, but then the final 20 minutes, the Stormers kind of have enough to take it away. So 10 minutes after the restart, Zas in for the Stormers' second try. Then Edinburgh strike through Bowen Venter. Thompson converts that. So Edinburgh actually leading with 20 minutes to go in the game. So, again, got to give them credit for that, because not many people would have said that they would have been in that position with 20 minutes to go. But unfortunately, they kind of have a bit of a collapse in those last 20 minutes. We have Makunu going in for the Stormers' third try, then Evan Roos, his second, and the bonus point try for the Stormers. And then right at the death, then Dion Fourie with a fifth try for the Stormers, kind of blows out the scoreline a little bit in favour of the Stormers. And again, Feinberg and Gamazulu, like Pollard against Munster, just, like a metronome off the tee, converts 4 of their 5 tries. But yeah, Edinburgh, decent fight from them, but they're, where they are on the table, they need more than fight at this point of the season. They're they need to be picking up points, and they're not doing it at the minute. And it feels like they're kind of any chance of making playoffs and Champions Cup for next season, for me, it's kind of gone at this stage for them. But Stormers 33, Edinburgh 14, the final score. And then we come on then to the final game of the weekend. That was Zebre Parma 12, Ulster 28. And, Zebre, they haven't won since the second round. Haven't won the URC, sorry, because they have had some wins in Europe, but haven't won the URC since the second round. So they won the first 2 games of the competition. They've lost them all on the bounce since then. But they put it up to Ulster in this. Fair play to them. They actually take the lead. Di Bartolomeo gets in. Ferias converts that as well. And they're leading 7-0. Ulster do respond though. McAllister gets in for a try. Humphreys converts that to tie us up. And we're at 7-all at the break. There was though a red card for Simone Jesse with about 10 minutes to go to the break. So Ulster know going into the second half that they've got that man advantage, and if they're patient, they should be able to make that count in the second half, and they do that, not brilliantly, honestly, but they do what they needed to do. So 4 minutes in the second half, Rob Herring goes in for the second try. Again, it's converted by Humphreys. Then Zach Ward gets in for the third try. Less than 10 minutes later, Nathan Doak now taking over the kicking duties. He converts that. And then 10 minutes ago, then Werner Koch, who has been a brilliant recruit for Ulster, goes in for the bonus point try, and Nathan Doak converts that. And then 5 minutes to go, we have Trula in for Zebre's second try of the game. And then, Zebre looking to get the final, another score after that, clock in the red, putting on pressure. They don't get in, but Scott Wilson does go to the bin 5 minutes after, after the 80 minutes as well. So they were applying a lot of pressure, but they couldn't actually come up with the score. But it's in terms of performance from Zebre, I thought it was pretty decent. Ulster, they needed a result and they got the result. So they're going to be happy with that. Kind of keeps them, in that top echelon in the league. They're going to have to kind of back it up though with more results, and they're going to have to get back to that kind of form that we've seen from them before, where they've kind of been irresistible. They're not quite there at the minute, but it feels like a lot of the Irish teams are kind of feeling their way back into the URC at the minute, so we'll have to see what happens there. Zebre 12, Ulster 28, the final score. Okay, so those are all the games for the weekend. Now let's have a look at the table. So Glasgow still leading the way there on 55 points. And, for me, still the favourites to finish in top spot. They do have their South African tour coming up as well, though, and some tough games besides that in the final. It's a tough run in for them in the final four, but they certainly have looked the best team in the league recently, and it's one of those ones where you look at it as a tough run in that could be a bit of a potential banana skin for them in terms of keeping that top spot. But also you have to look at it from the point of view of, if they can come through that, they're going to be really battle hardened for the knockout stages as well. So kind of a double-edged sword with that, I think. Stormers, who've recovered well recently, another win at the weekend for them, and they maintain that second place that they, retook last round. They're on 51 points, and at the minute, they're the one kind of realistic threat to Glasgow at the top there. I think other teams, you're looking at a bit of a collapse, I think, from Glasgow, for teams like Ulster and Leinster to kind of come into that race for the top spot at the minute. But yeah, Stormers keeping up the pressure on them, keeping them honest, and it's going to be interesting to see if the Stormers can maintain their better recent form if Glasgow do have a stumble, because there have been points where Glasgow maybe stumbled a little bit, and it's been at the same time when the likes of Ulster, Leinster, Munster and Cardiff all had stumbles as well, so it didn't really affect them. But now you have the Stormers on a really good run. Third place then, Ulster on 47, so they're 8 points back from the Warriors. So realistically, mathematically for them, Glasgow have to lose 2 games of their last 4 for Ulster to have any chance to claim that top spot. And that's not even talking about the fact that even if Glasgow did have that wobble, the Stormers would also have to lose at least 1 game for Ulster to have any chance to claim top spot. So I think they're just aiming for, staying somewhere in that top 4 and maybe, getting lucky to get into the top 2, maybe, if they do, have a good run of form towards the end of the season. Leinster then 4th place on 46. And, for them now, it's, I think any kind of thoughts of potential home semi-finals or whatever should kind of go out with their heads at the minute. And it's just about now getting that team playing well and finding some proper form where, their systems are working for them, and they're it feels like they can actually perform both home and away, because they're definitely, if they're going to retain their title, they have to perform at least once, probably more than once, in the knockout stages away from home as well. Then the team who really have been shooting up the table, the Lions up to 5th place on 43, and the Lions have been, had a few seasons where they've been thereabouts in terms of making the playoffs and then kind of falling away. But at this point, it feels like, they still got a couple more games in South Africa as well. So, with the form and the home forms they've had, you feel like they're going to secure enough points to be somewhere in the top 8. And even if they do have a bit of a stumble when they come up to Europe, because they have been poor on the road, you feel like it's still going to be enough for them to maybe sneak into that top 8. If they miss it again, though, it will be really kind of sad for them. But for me, it feels like they're a team that have momentum, whereas the teams directly below them at the minute in 6th and 7th are heading in the opposite direction. So just got to keep that momentum going, maybe for a couple of more rounds, and then by that point it may not matter, what happens to them on the road after that. Next, then we have Cardiff in 6th place. They've been as high as 2nd place this season. They've been a fixture in the top 4 for much of the season, but they are falling away. They did get losing bonus point this week against the Sharks, which kind of keeps them in that top 6 just about. But yeah, you feel at this point now they've done their South African tour. They now have to start producing results at home. They got at least to win the rest of the games at home and pick something up on the road as well, just to maintain, because it's so tight there between themselves in 6th and Connacht in 9th place as well. Can't afford any more slip ups from them. Same as Munster. Munster got that losing bonus, or that second bonus point, so the losing bonus point, against the Bulls, and that keeps their noses just in front of the Bulls, because they hadn't got that, Bulls would be sitting in 7th and Munster would be in 8th, and they're on 41 points as well as Cardiff. So another team with very little room in wiggle room in terms of staying in those playoff places. Then the Bulls, who've done really well to get themselves back up into that top 8. They've had a real yo-yo season. So good at the start of the season initially, and then fell away, and now they're working their way back up again. But again, another team, they've got to keep that momentum going. We know, it feels like one of those teams, from, I'd say from 5th to 8th, that block of 4, one of those teams is probably going to miss out on the playoffs, and you don't want to be the team that happens to. And the reason I think that is because you got Connacht there in 9th place, who are just waiting to pounce. Another stumble for any one of those teams. The Connacht are in the playoffs, and they're a team that have found some proper form and some, proper consistency as well that we're not used to seeing from them. So they're a real threat to any of those 4 teams that sit directly above them. Then 10th place, we have the Hollywood Sharks on 33 points. For me, they're kind of almost a cut-off, I would say, at this point, in terms of being an outside bet of making the top 4, because they're 7 points behind the Bulls. There is another potential 20 points to play for in terms of 4 games that they win every one with a bonus point. So it feels possible for them to make 7 points up on the Bulls over those games. The Bulls obviously aren't going to be a static target. They're going to be picking points as well. So 7 points feels just about doable. Ospreys down 11th place though, 10 points behind the Bulls. That feels too much of a stretch. They've got 30 points at the minute, Bulls have 40. Ospreys did pull off a miracle a couple of seasons ago to make the playoffs, but this feels like an even bigger ask for them, and I don't think they have the form to be able to do it, honestly. Benetton then in 12th place. Disappointing season for them. They're on 28 points, and for them, I think best case scenario, maybe get themselves up to 10th. If they can outdo Ospreys and Sharks in the run-in. Worst case scenario, they could end up down in the bottom 3, possibly. And for a team that have made so many strides forward over the URC years, really would like to see a bit more from them than that. Then 13th place, Edinburgh, as I said, any kind of outside chance that they had of making the playoffs definitely gone at this point. There's 17 points behind the Bulls. There's only a possible 20 points for them to get in the last 4 games. So the maximum they can get is 43 points, and there's no way that the likes of the Bulls, Connacht, even the Sharks, or potentially Ospreys as well, are not going to get 43 points or more by the end of the season. So yeah, they're definitely out of it. Same for Scarlets at 14th place, 21 points for them. Better performance against Leinster, and yeah, they're kind of in that position now where it is all about get those performances in the bank and use that to build for next season. Similar to the Dragons as well. Was impressed with them this weekend. They're down at 15th place, 21 points for them. Another team looking towards next season. And then finally then Zebre, 16th place. They've got the 12 points there. Another team, I think, I think they're kind of in between 2 stools compared to the others, because I feel like Zebre definitely will have that same mentality of let's look towards next season and improve. But also I feel like, given the fact that they had those 2 wins at the start of the season, that Dale wanted to, by hook or by crook, to win one more game before the end of the season. So Dale kind of have those 2 things of win another URC game and give themselves a good base for next season as well. So that's our table. As I said, only 4 games left. There is now a break for European rugby next weekend, and we'll be covering as many of those games as we can as well. And then we'll kind of be going back and forth between Europe and URC from this point in. But URC again shaping up to be a really exciting run in.